Seemingly endless streams of bombers fly overhead, destroying more German infrastructure with each passing day. Ground forces are constantly bombarded by Allied air power, causing massive losses of armor and equipment. Desperate to strike back at this devastation, a design was presented for a new anti-aircraft gun. This design would become known as the Kugelblitz. Throughout history, there have been countless tanks, all designed to kill. But not all have been a success. What happened to the ones that never made it? And why did they fail? My name is Cone of Arc. Join me as we journey through time, uncovering failed projects and forgotten creations in Cursed by Design. Special thanks to my YouTube members for choosing this topic to be featured this month in the monthly poll. If you'd like to help decide future topics I cover, please consider checking out the reward tiers by clicking the join button below the video. Now on to the tank. The word Kugelblitz is German for ball lightning, and is now commonly used as a term in astrophysics to describe a black hole made out of light or radiation rather than matter. But in the late stages of World War II, it would have an entirely different use, the Leichte Flakpanzer IV Kugelblitz. The concept for the Kugelblitz began in April of 1944 by a man named Josef von Glatter-Gotz. The idea was born from the twin 30mm anti-aircraft gun mount designed for the Type 21 U-boat. This system was known as the 3cm Maschinenkanon Mk303 Doppelflak, or its codename Brunn. Envisioning this being used as the basis for a new Flakpanzer, a design was drawn up and later presented to General Heinz Guderian, alongside several other Flakpanzer designs. The design was looked upon favorably, and on his insistence, the design continued development. As November of 1944 arrived, so did the first prototype of the Kugelblitz. This early version used the originally planned system from the U-boat project. However, due to supply issues with both the turrets and guns, which were already in short supply and planned for their originally intended naval use already, this layout was quickly shelved. Undeterred, the designers set back to work to try and find a way around these supply constraints to bring their idea to life. Being unable to use the Mk303 as originally planned, their eyes quickly fell on the Mk103-38, which was in service with the Luftwaffe. This cannon was also a 30mm and boasted a 400 to 650 round per minute rate of fire. Another benefit this gun had was the fact that it was a belt fed, which would make life easier for the loaders inside the closed turret of this machine. It could also fire the revered Minengeschoss round, which in theory would make it even more deadly to its intended targets. These guns would be mounted in a fully enclosed fighting compartment, unlike previous designs. This was one of the major advantages the design offered, as it would provide protection for the crew from enemy fire, especially from aircraft. It was essentially designed as an armored sphere, which would be mounted in a turret ring for lateral traverse with a pivot at the center point that would allow for elevation, similar to the later oscillating turrets used by the French after the war. Face-hardened 20mm plates were planned to be used for this, which would have provided sufficient protection against most small arms. The two cannons would protrude out through welded steel tubes with some adjustable screws holding the barrels in place, which would allow for alignment of the guns. Although this design did provide a degree of protection for the crew, it came at a cost. That cost was space. Within this relatively small turret would sit 3 men, a gun layer for each cannon on the sides, and a commander sitting in the middle. Although there were 3 hatches on the roof of the turret, the 2 on either side were fairly narrow and more likely were to be used for spotting or perhaps to help with ventilation. The primary hatch was located above the commander, which would be great for him in the event of a fire, but very concerning for the 2 remaining in the turret, I would imagine. But on the bright side, at least they could both fire their cannons individually, although how long they could fire continuously would also become an issue, as we'll discuss in a bit. Next came the trouble of mounting this turret onto a hull. Several different tanks were considered, including the Tiger and Panther, but those were far too valuable. In the end, it was decided to use the hull of a Panzer IV with some modifications. The specific variants chosen were most likely the H or J, although it's not known specifically which were used. One source also mentions plans to use the hull from the Jagdpanzer 38T, and the Panzerkampfwagen 38D was later considered to mount the turret, however these would never see development. Back on the Panzer IV, changes were needed to mount the Kugelblitz turret. These mainly involved the turret ring. The Panzer IV turret ring was too small to mount the wider turret. To solve this, the Tiger's turret ring was fitted to the hull. The hull roof was also flattened, removing the slight angle from above the driver and hull gunner's positions. Other than this, the hull was the same as any other Panzer IV. The Army was impressed by the design and decided to move ahead with production, starting with an order for 30 vehicles. It is unknown exactly how many were actually completed by the end of the war, but it's assumed to be around 2 to 5. This was due to many issues that plagued the production of these tanks. With Allied bombing constantly impeding every German production line, materials and parts were hard to acquire. With demand for tanks coming from every direction, it became difficult to even secure the relatively small number needed for Kugelblitz production. Likely the holes used were from recovered panzers brought back to the factories for repairs. The troubles did not end there. The special spheres for the turret called for lightweight armor plate, but shortages caused shortcuts to be taken in their production. This resulted in increased weight due to different materials being utilized, which might have been workable if not for the next problem. Due to lack of space, an electric turret drive was unable to be fitted, so instead a hydraulic-powered system was considered. Once again though, the supply demon struck, and with no ability to produce such a system, the only remaining choice was to resort to manual traverse. Thanks to this added weight and lack of power traverse, the Kugelblitz could only manage 10 degrees per second traverse speed. Had it been built to spec, this would likely have been closer to 60 degrees per second. At this reduced speed, the ability for the Kugelblitz to accurately engage enemy aircraft was greatly diminished. With such limited space came another issue: where to keep the ammunition. As we mentioned before, the Mk103s were capable of 400 rounds per minute rate of fire, while the tank was only able to carry 1200 ready rounds. With no secondary storage space within the turret, this would result in a very short period of engagement time, followed by an awkward scramble to get more ammunition, which could potentially be carried in the hull, although none of my sources mention if more ammunition was stored within the hull. The few Kugelblitz that did manage to leave the factory were pressed into service. How they performed or even where they served is largely a mystery and will likely remain that way given the state of the Reich at that point. One photo does exist of what is presumed to be a destroyed Kugelblitz in Berlin, as well as the remains of a turret near the village of Spikra, which was destroyed by the advancing American forces and was later discovered in 1999. One complete turret was captured by the Allies as well, being held at the Royal Military College of Science in Britain until it was returned to Germany. It is now on display at the, brace yourselves, Versammlung der Heeresfluggewehrschule in Rendsburg. In the end, the Kugelblitz was doomed to failure due to the state of German industry at the time it was being built. Although it provided better protection than vehicles such as the Ostwind or Wirbelwind, its cramped turret and limited traverse speed likely would have caused it to underperform in comparison. Even the idea to mount this turret on the Panzer IV is questionable given the weight of the components. Unfortunately for this machine, it will go down in history as yet another late war vehicle born too late to have a chance of affecting any part of the conflict, remaining as just an interesting side note in German Flakpanzer design. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing for more like it. Once again, I'd like to thank all my YouTube members for voting on this for the monthly poll. I learned a lot while researching this one and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. Appearing on your screen now will be links to another one of my videos as well as the entire Cursed by Design playlist. If you like this video, why not watch them all and learn about some more interesting yet rarely looked at tanks. See you then.